to Search the Scriptures. We are in the book of Hebrews. We are on study number 15 in a 21-part study of the book of Hebrews. We take this from Alan Stibbs' book, Search the Scriptures. It's a 3-year study in the Bible. We're done with year 1, a couple months into year number 2. Thanks for joining us today. Let's get right into study number 15, which covers the faith chapter of the Bible, the first 22 verses anyway. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 through 22. We're going to answer 3 different sets of questions in this study today. The first is, notice in detail in chapter number 11 how these characteristics of faith were exhibited in the lives of all the individuals that are mentioned in this chapter, and what does this teach you and I that we need to desire in our lives if we are to truly please God. Secondly, from verses 7 through 16, to what should faith in God pay very careful attention, and what does its full expression of our faith involve, and where is the crowning fulfillment of its hope to be enjoyed, and how should an awareness of that affect our present outlook, our actions, and our attitudes towards life. Third set of questions here from verses 17 through 19. What apparent contradiction was involved, as far as Abraham first saw it, between God's promise and God's command concerning Isaac? And how did Abraham's faith in God triumph over this test? And what, may we hope, did Abraham have in God? Let's look at Hebrews 11, verses 1 through 22. Now, faith is being sure of what we hope for, and it's certain of what we do not see. And that is what the ancients were commended for. It was by faith that we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith, he, Abel, was commended as a righteous man when God spoke well of his offering. And by faith, he still speaks even though he's dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death, and he could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. Verse 6, and without faith it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. And by faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family, and by his faith he condemned the world, and he became heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. And by faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed, and he went, even though he did not know where he was going. And by faith he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country, and he lived in tents as Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith Abraham, even though he was past age and Sarah herself was barren, was enabled to become a father because he considered him faithful who made the promise, being God. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, Abraham, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. And all these people were still living by faith when they died. They didn't receive the things promised. They only saw them, and they welcomed them from a distance. And they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they're looking for a country of their own. If they've been thinking of a country they had left, they would have had an opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God's not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And by faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. And he who had received the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, it's through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. And Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead. And figuratively speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. And by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. And by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons, and worshipped as he leaned on top of his staff. And by faith Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions about his bones. Study 15, Hebrews 11, 1 through 22. Notice in detail how these characteristics of faith were exhibited in the lives of the individuals mentioned here. And what does this teach you and I that we need to have as a main desire in our life if we are to please God? Well, find to please God, if you're to please God in our lives, our utmost desire has to be to obey Him. Has to be to obey Him no matter what, no matter how difficult the task He gives us to do. My possessions, my home, my family, all that must be set aside, and He must become the primary influence of my life. There must be an unswerving allegiance to Him above all things of this world. Second question from verses 7 through 16. So what should faith in God pay attention, and what does its full expression involve? And where is the crowning fulfillment of its hopes to be enjoyed, and how should such awareness affect my present outlook, action, and attitude to life? Well, faith in God must pay attention to the voice of God. Hearing, however, isn't enough. We got to follow through with action. And said action can't expect an immediate result. The true results of biblical faith will not fully be enjoyed in this life. They await us in eternity. Knowing that, we have to keep our eyes fixed on the author and the finisher of our faith when the road begins to wear us down. And we have to remember that there at the finish line, He's standing with His arms held open wide to receive us. And He's standing there with the leaves from the tree of life to revive us. The third question from verses 17 through 19, what apparent contradiction was involved as Abraham first saw it between God's promise and God's command concerning Isaac, and how did Abraham's faith in God triumph over this test? And what we hope did Abraham have in God? Well, God had promised Abraham that he'd be the father of many nations, while at the same time He requires him to sacrifice his one and only son. The only way that this could make sense was to believe that once the son was killed, that he would be resurrected from the dead. Abraham had a new hope in life beyond the grave. And I hope that you are realizing that hope in your life, and you are willing to sacrifice all things in obedience to the Lord, and you are ready to hear His voice and take a step of faith, whether you ever see the results in this life or not. God bless. I hope you're having a fantastic day.